Here we go.
There we are. We're ready. We're back. It's Thursday again. We're here for Thinking Lake Pass Optional, where we leave it up to you. And if you were in the green room portion of this, we don't want to know anything more. Let's just keep that to ourselves. This is an event we put on once every other week, in which we have two guests come on. We have a conversation with them. We chat about culture, about business, about brand, about design. We do have one requirement that we talk about, which is that you have to say the word design, which is now that's taken care of in this overall discussion. We have two amazing guests with us today. We have Peace Coffee and Verse Chocolate, Scott and Lee. I'll have them introduce themselves, but before that, I want to make sure we get a word in for our number one sponsor in this, Capsule, which is in the chat, capsule.us. We are a special projects firm here in Minneapolis, in which we help people invent things, bring brands to life, refresh brands that are getting tired and old, and just generally do good things, create intellectual property for people. That's the kind of stuff we do. If you want to know more about that, you can contact me or Kelly or anyone here, really. We have in the chat, we ask you to put questions. We love to see video of people as they're going through their day or their morning, and then, but keep the volume mute so we don't have to have too many conversations going on. That is as much as I have as the preamble. There's a lot to get into. We're going to be talking about things that we all love, chocolate and coffee. So I'm not going to do too much on that, other than to full disclosure, Scott is a client and we did help him create this chocolate. So we'll be talking all about that. But let's start it off. Unless, Kelly, do you have anything else to add to my preamble?
No, I think we're going to, after our introductions, talk about our lucky recipients, those that attended today, some chocolate and coffee coming your way. But let's, I don't want to steal thunder from our guests here. Let's have them introduce themselves, and then we can jump into how we'll deliver some coffee and chocolate to everyone here.
Lee, you want to get us started?
Sure.
Background.
Sure. Hi, everybody. My name is Lee Wallace. I am based in Minneapolis, Minnesota, and I own and run a coffee company called Peace Coffee. Peace Coffee is a fair trade, organic, also delicious, I'm biased, but delicious coffee product. We've been in operation since 1996, and our tagline is "In It for Good." We really built our business for the ground up with an eye to being a business that focuses on our impact at coffee growing communities, our impact in communities in which we operate, sustainability, and being an excellent employer. I did just want to, just off the top, tell everybody that we had a little bit of news today at Peace Coffee. It's big news, but it's not, in my mind, bad news. We have made the decision that we are closing our coffee shops in Minneapolis. Well, they've been closed since March due to the pandemic. They are not reopening, and really that's because we realized our core is our wholesale business. We've been in operation for 10 years in retail, and our wholesale business is really thriving. And that's where we're going to focus our attention and efforts moving forward. The kind of twist or turn or exciting outcome out of all of this is that we have formed a partnership with a nonprofit specialty coffee company called Wildflower Coffee. They employ youth experiencing homelessness. So we have turned over the keys, basically, of our coffee shop, our flagship coffee shop on Minnehaha Avenue. They will be reopening as Wildflower Coffee, but we are providing them with all of the equipment, all of our forms, all of our plates, our safe, everything. And they will be able to employ 20 youth experiencing homelessness when they reopen in December. So it's just a way for us to double down on mission. And there's a really thriving community in the Longfellow neighborhood and throughout the city of Minneapolis that supported that coffee shop. So those folks will still be able to have their knitting groups and their chats about politics, and Peace Coffee will be served there. It's just there'll be this added extra really exciting dimension.
Exciting. Thanks, Lee. Very exciting. Scott?
Good morning to everyone, or afternoon, depending on where you are. Thank you, Aaron and Kelly, for letting me be on your Think and Link Pants optional. I got to do this last October in Minneapolis live at their office, and it was an exciting time for us because it's the first time we really talked about chocolate in more of an open forum. And so again, Scott Walker, the founder and the CEO of Verse Chocolate. Yes, Capsule helped us come up with that name and the whole design that we have, and the whole team at Capsule was very important into what we've done. And our idea, I came out of the big, some people call it bad, but the big cocoa industry. I one time was the president of ADM, our Daniels Midland cocoa and chocolate business, and spent about 12 years in Europe between the Netherlands and Switzerland, and moved back to the United States about 6 years ago. Currently live in Springfield, Missouri. I moved here to be the CEO of a pet food company, and whenever that gig ended, I just stayed here and just haven't left since. And but whenever I was like, you know, why Verse Chocolate? Why did we start this? And it was because I knew a lot about the cocoa industry from the big brands, or not. You know, we were a supplier to the big brands, and we were sourcing. We had assets in Africa. We built a factory in Ghana, in the Ivory Coast. We had a big asset. We were in Asia. We were in all over Europe and North America for ingredients. Like we supplied. If you ever go to Starbucks, sorry, Lee, but if you go to Starbucks and had a mocha, it would be that cocoa that was in that mocha. We made about 90% of that globally at the factories we had in the Netherlands and in Singapore. And so that was my responsibility. And when I left them, and as I left the pet food industry, I was like, what do I know best is cocoa. And I was like, you know, I think there's a better way to do cocoa. I think there's a better way to do chocolate. And so really for about 3 years now, we've really focused on how do we have a great, and we know for a fact that people know, well, most people who have a certain education level know that dark chocolate's good for them, but they're not sure why. They're not sure it's going to taste good. And we really started digging into that. And the reason people buy anything is because it tastes good. It's good for them. They like it. No, I like that experience. And so we're like, okay, how do we make a great tasting dark chocolate? And how do we have less sugar? And so we came, basically, that's been the focus. We want a great tasting dark chocolate. We want the darkest chocolate we can have. And we know through the fermentation process of the cocoa beans, which and by doing it a certain way, and then through the process of how we manufacture and our recipe, that we can have this great tasting chocolate that's really dark. It's a 90%, but it doesn't taste like a 90%. And it's, you know, it's made with organic cocoa beans, it's organic sugar. And there are some other pieces of that it's all cocoa. And so we've made this 90% cocoa that tastes more like a 70, maybe not quite. Some people would say it's 60, some people would say it's 80 in their mind, but that's what we're doing. And we just officially launched on the 5th of October. So, and we're only online right now at versechocolate.com. And so that's what we're doing. And so far, it's got 1 gram of sugar. So those of you per serving, those of you who are on keto or paleo or looking for that, it's been a hit with people in that arena. So yeah, so that's a little bit of my background and what we're doing. So thank you.
Great, thank you, Scott. And I'll mention real quickly, I know I said this a couple of minutes ago, both Verse Chocolate, Peace Coffee have both graciously offered a promo code or a discount opportunity for all of our attendees today for some chocolate, a 12-count box of chocolate and some Peace Coffee. We will be sending, coming from Capsule, just a follow-up with the discount codes for both of those offerings that all of you can take advantage of. So again, thank you, Lee and Scott, for that offer. If we may, I'd love to jump right in with an initial question. I know we've had, Lee, Scott, a number of discussions around mission-driven, some of the key pillars of your business models, and wanted to jump right into to what you see as the importance of transparency in the supply chain. We've talked about the commodity farmer profitability and then ethically sourcing ingredients, Scott, as you just were alluding to. Would love to have both of you please share your perspective on transparently traded and fair trade, more from the perspective of viable business models. Just dig into that a little bit. I think there's some confusion around what those words mean, but would just love your perspectives on those two. So again, transparently traded, fair trade, and what that means to your business models. Who wants to dig in first?
I don't have a preference. You want me to go first, Scott?
Yeah, please.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Okay.
Yeah.
You know, I always, people always get to the point with me in these conversations where they kind of throw their hands up, because it really comes down to, you have to research the business that you're buying from if you really want to understand what they do. And that's unfortunate. That, you know, fair trade, we got started in fair trade from the start. We were the first fair trade certified coffee company in North America. And it's really core to what we do, because more than 50% of the world's coffee farmers tend very small parcels of land. And coffee is naturally a shade plant. So there will be all kinds of different crops growing on these farms. There'll be mangoes, there'll be trees that maybe they're getting grown for wood. And one coffee plant produces on average about 1 pound of roasted coffee by the time it gets processed and all the way through our facility. That one coffee tree only yields 1 pound of coffee. So if you're a small scale farmer, you really have two options. One is just to sell to the guy who drives by on his motorcycle and offers you a price. And essentially in that instance, you're a price taker. Or you can participate in any number of more ethical ways of selling your coffee. In our case, we choose to focus on those small scale coffee farmers, and they need to come together with a bunch of other coffee farmers to produce a shipping container of coffee, because that's the way coffee gets exported and sold. And so, you know, from the start, we have worked very directly with small scale coffee farmers, very directly with cooperatives. In coffee, we find that cooperatives, when they're run well, which, you know, we do a lot of due diligence on that, can really have a lot of impact, and can really improve the communities that the cooperatives are operating in. Now, there can be very long, complex fair trade supply chains. And I think Scott can talk a little bit about his experience with those. I personally haven't been part of them. But, you know, and there can be, you know, some big companies that are just slapping a label on their bag, and fair trade is not core to what they do. They're just trying to get the consumer to say, oh, I'm doing a better thing by buying this. There's very different models between somebody who's just trying to scoop up that consumer and a business that has fair trade or ethical trade or transparent trade at the heart of the way that they built their business. And in Peace Coffee's case, you know, you can find our contracts online. You know, we are completely transparent. We're transparent all along our supply chain. So, you know, we ask the co-ops that we work with to supply us with their financials so we can verify how the money that we're paying for that coffee is distributed. And we're also totally transparent with our supply chain about how we run our business as well. I'm going to stop there. I'm sure we're going to get into more, but I want to let Scott talk a little bit and then.
Thanks, Lee. Scott.
Okay, that was good, Lee. Thank you. I think the idea of so I guess you have the label fair trade, and then you have the, you know, what is it? Are you trading fairly? And I think that the idea of absolutely trading fairly is critical to what we're talking about and what we want to do. And what the label is, I think Lee just did a really good job of defining and describing that. And in my commodity background of what I've done in the past, yeah, there's a lot of that's a label, and it kind of just, people look for that, and that kind of solves certain issues for people. Whereas what we want to do is we want to be transparent. What Verse Chocolate is, we want to be. And so we'd say the difference between that specifically fair trade and then transparency, or the transparent trade, is that being clear about what are the values we're paying to the farmers, what is that they're actually getting, and so like we are sourcing all of our cocoa through a group out of California called Uncommon Cacao, CACAO, and you can go on their website, you can go see what they're doing, but all their cocoa pricing is transparent, and we're buying all of our cocoa beans to make our chocolate through them, and right now we're buying all that in West Africa, and they're very transparent about which co-op it's coming through and the prices that they're going. So to me, that transparency allows for, because I believe the best thing that we can do, going back to Lee's example of the coffee farmer and how much one tree will produce. I mean, cocoa farmer is similar. It's a smallholder farmers. They have other crops there. They're all price takers, but yet they don't understand the value of what they have in their hands specifically, and how we, what we value in that. And so what we're trying to do is shorten that supply chain to bring that transparency, to like connect I like to say, connect the farmer to the consumer, connect an innovative farmer to a discerning consumer, so that they can understand that. So when we know when we ferment the cocoa differently, it's less bitter, and because it's less bitter, we don't need as much sugar. Now, to the big cocoa industry, sugar is the cheapest thing you can put in your chocolate. So they want more sugar. But we know that the healthiest thing you can do is actually have less sugar. But you also can't handle the bitterness. So when you ferment it better and you pay them for that, and you're transparent about it, and you pay them for that quality, and that would be one of the big differences, is we're paying for a quality product and making sure that that farmer knows what that quality is. So then we know, okay, hey, we don't have to put as much sugar in here, and we can get less bitterness, a better flavor for you. And that's the difference to me of a fair trade specifically and a transparent trade.
I think Scott brought up something that's really important, which is the role of the importer. So in so many products, the company positions itself as, I'm ethically traded. Here's a picture of me with a coffee farmer, and I buy directly. And there is almost always an importer between that company and those relationships. And I think it's sort of the big kind of emperor has no clothes conversation, is that people really don't talk about who is importing that product. Our innovation, there are some great importers out there. Our innovation is that we actually started our own importing company. So we're vertically integrated, and we truly have those relationships directly with coffee farmers. But I think, that's the thing that makes me kind of, it's really insider baseball, but it also makes me crazy, because the importer is so essential, and good importers will have that technical assistance that Scott is talking about, and will really help form that partnership between, like in Scott's examples, what Scott's doing and those farmers. And it is that technical assistance and doing the things like Scott's talking about, that's going to help lift people out of poverty and begin to understand, as he said, the value of their product, and understand they don't have to sell it for whatever the guy on the motorcycle is offering that day.
Right. So, and again, we've had the conversations around, it's really about shifting this dynamic, the power dynamic, to better equip farmers, both coffee and cacao, to negotiate their own pricing, giving them the data that supports that. So no, it's fascinating. It's a very complex conversation. I appreciate you both just diving in. There's a lot we could talk about there, but certainly thank you for sharing your perspectives. Right.
That was great. Yeah. Yeah, that was one of the areas that we wanted to make sure we cover and talk about, because I've written about it in chocolate, specifically in chocolate, and that Scott has exposed me to what can happen and how some of that labeling can be a little bit shallow. And it's the worst form of the world of brands, when there's nothing there. And the way that Lee talks about it, and the way that Scott talks about it, or has created businesses around this, it's a much more authentic way. And we should be seeking that out in the brands that we buy and that we are connected to. And not enough of us are, I believe. So I love that the two of you and our conversations are on the same page. It's just so amazing. We're very close in philosophy. The next question I've got for both of you, and Lee, if you want to start this one off, but what inspired you to take on the ownership role at Peace? What inspires you in the business? And is there anything you would have done differently if you look back from today in the Peace Coffee business?
So I'm a little bit of a unique animal in all of this, in that I started running Peace Coffee in 2006 for the former owners. So Peace Coffee was started by a nonprofit, which I think, because it was so unique when it started, really helped create the brand that it is today, because their aspiration was to build a demonstration project, essentially, that showed that you can be a really good corporate actor. And they wanted something they could point to. They decided that the business had gotten too big for them to own, essentially. I mean, it posed a real risk to them, and they needed to focus on being a nonprofit. So they decided to sell the business in 2016, and I purchased it from them in May of 2018. And the reason why I purchased it was, I mean, in a lot of ways, they let me run it as if I owned it. It was a very unique and wonderful partnership. And I also knew that I wasn't done. You know, I still had things that I wanted to get done with the business. So I wanted to make sure that happened. So I took a swing at it and fortunately connected with the ball. I don't know, I don't use a lot of sports metaphors, but I'm going for it. Yeah, things that I wish I'd done differently. You know, the broken part of an entrepreneur's brain is that they, at least in my case, I don't really think that way. Like, I think of everything that goes wrong as a learning opportunity, and then I just continue merrily on my way. So I struggled to think of any one thing. I mean, I definitely have learned a ton, but I think if you are going to be an entrepreneur, you've just gotta approach it that way of, you know, failure is not failure, it's a learning opportunity, and then you just kind of dust yourself off and soldier on.
Yes.
Great answer.
Love that. Yes. Scott, let's talk about.
That's good. So what was the question again, Aaron? Why did I do this?
Yeah, why on earth did you do this? Why would you get into the chocolate business?
Yeah, it's a good question. I lived 10 straight years out of the United States from 2004 to 2014. And I met, you know, I don't know, I kind of like missed what happened in the United States in that period of time. And so at that time, I had 5 years in the Netherlands and then 5 years in Switzerland. And when we moved back at the end of 2014, and again, I went into the pet food space, I saw that there was this change in the U.S. dynamic about food and how much people cared about their food and where it came from. And that was not there in 2000. Like the words GMO, the words gluten-free, the words, I forgot but they just organic were not used in 2004 when I left. I was living in Milwaukee at that time, and just weren't used. And they really weren't used that much. I mean, already Europe was all GMO free anyway, so nobody talked about it. It was already GMO free. And organic was, yeah, but nobody really talked about it. And gluten-free was not a thing yet in Europe. And so I come back and I see, wow, and I see it in pet food. And I'm like, okay. And frankly, I learned a lot in pet food, humbling experience, back to learning a lot from failure, but humbling experience, learned a lot. But we also saw a business just take off because of those specific things. And when I left them, I'm like, well, what do I know best is cocoa. And how do I take what's happening there and seeing all these chocolate makers here in the United States doing, these small guys, what they're doing. And I'm like, well, let me try to understand that and say, okay, is there a better way to do cocoa and chocolate? And I was like, well, I was on the inside. I mean, I ran this really large cocoa company. I was the chairman of the European Cocoa Association. And I was like, I think there may be a better way to do this. And so then I also realized how much people do not know about chocolate. I was shocked how much people don't know about cocoa and chocolate. And here I had this deep knowledge of the whole supply chain. And I was like, well, I think there's a better way to do it. And I thought the supply chain and the ethical aspect was a big part of it. But I started realizing if it doesn't taste good, nobody cares. And so I was like, it's got to taste great or people start getting turned off from it. And so like today, I mean, there's a lot of chocolates out of here who people eat and they really like, but their supply chain, frankly, is not so great. But it's like, okay, nobody really cares because I just like the taste of it. I was like, I think there's a much better way to do this. And so I just felt like I needed to take these experiences I've had and all these people I knew, mainly in Africa, and figure out how do I connect that farmer to the consumer. And I started talking to people, and I guess I get excited about it. It's incredibly rewarding to do something like this and to try to, but yet, humbling. I don't know anything about consumer goods. I'm a commodity trader. I grew up on a farm in Illinois, grain farm. I'm a commodity trader. I know nothing about branding and consumer goods. And that's where Aaron, Kelly, the whole Capsule team had to help me really understand this. And I've got a lot to learn, but it is learning. It's a ton of fun. And so I guess, I don't know if that really answers the question, but that's, I think there's a better way to do chocolate. I don't think people understand how good cocoa is for them. Actually, the cocoa bean itself is really good for you. And it is hard for the farmer to make consistently a good cocoa bean. And and over the years, and it's because we've changed the industry, put a lot of sugar and milk around it to make it uniform and to make it more appealing to you. And I think, let's have less sugar, let's have no milk, and let's make it as appealing to your taste buds as possible.
Love it. And lots of resilience, right, Scott? We've talked about resilience as an entrepreneur. Just soldier on.
Yes. Yeah, lots of resilience. I mean, I can run with that. I know one of the things that how do you make decisions? Like, one of the things that you see is like, what's true? And I think there's a lot of things you just don't know what's true, but you start like, okay, I have this vision, I have this idea that people want to eat. Like, well, what is true? I thought the ethical part of the supply chain was the most important part. So I started really digging into that and getting data points. And as I started digging into that, I found out that actually, yeah, that's important, but if it doesn't taste good, it doesn't matter. And so then you're like, well, because then if doesn't taste good, you may be paying. So then you're like, oh, so then you're like, well, what's true? Oh, what's true? And I did a lot of research on this, and especially, well, it doesn't matter which age group. I mean, it does, but millennials specifically, they really care first about what's good for them. Like, does it taste good to me? Then it's about the sustainable, the fair trade part of it, the sustainable part of it. And then it's about the environment. All the research I did, I was like, oh, well, that makes a lot of sense. So the first thing is it tastes good. And then you start, okay, that's true. So now I'm going to direct everything about that. I mean, it's got to taste great. So every decision we make has to be about, it has to taste great. And so then the resilience comes, shoot, this isn't tasting great. What do we do? What do we got to change? Let's change this. Let's do that. And so you just figure out what's true. You just keep aiming at, that's true, that's true, that's true. And that's where resilience comes to me. Just, it's true, and you don't move off that mark. It's got to taste great. And that's where you go.
Love it. That's great. I'm gonna take a shift really quickly from logistics, operations, supply chain, and talk a little bit about culture. How important is culture within both of your organizations, and what role do you think culture plays in recruiting or attracting and then retaining good people or people in general? Lee, you want to start?
Yeah, sure. I'd be happy to. I think that our culture, at least in Peace Coffee's case, our culture and our mission are intertwined. So, our North Star, and this would probably apply to Scott as well, is the more coffee we can buy, the more impact we can have. Those things are directly linked. So what I hear from my employees is, wow, you have a really long day filling coffee bags. or roasting coffee, or riding your bicycle through the snow, because we do bike delivery, you can connect that work all the way back to the farm, and you can really understand my work had meaning today. Obviously, our culture goes well beyond that. We are a certified benefit B Corporation, which is a certification that looks at all aspects of your business, your impact on your workers, your impact on environment, impact on supply chain, and impact on your local community. And that's hugely important to us, is that we consider a lot of our actions and a lot of our decisions as a business, and the impact that they are going to have. I think being an employer is a real privilege, in my opinion. People are giving up huge portions of their life to dedicate their efforts to my business, and I want them to feel like they own the business alongside me, and feel like they can participate and bring their best efforts and have their voices heard. And we've seen, culture in the pandemic is a whole topic CEOs have been talking a lot about. How do you preserve your culture in the face of a pandemic? How do you, we don't have those water cooler moments anymore. People don't just bump into me and tell me what they're thinking about or what's going on in their life. So that's been something we've been working on hard, is how do you preserve your culture in the pandemic.
Great, Lee, thank you for sharing that. Scott, your thoughts?
Yeah, how do you define culture? I don't know. To me, back to talk about transparency. One of the things, I'm fairly transparent about a lot of things, probably to a fault in a lot of ways. And I think that's you just look for people who, I don't know. In one way, you look for people who are that way, and you just talk about, hey, this is, does that fit? And then if it doesn't fit, it's clear to other people, this doesn't fit, and they just need to. It's not going to work out. I think that I also think the one about culture. The culture is clear, obviously very important. With us, as you become an entrepreneur, as you start to make mistakes, you learn that we don't have all the answers at all. And in fact, we most of the time only have about 2% of the answers. And it's the people that we put around us that actually have the answers. And to me, it's that team that's the most important part. And just knowing that you can trust each other and have the candid, open conversation. The best thing about me living in Europe was the 7 years in total. I lived in the Netherlands, and the Dutch, they have this incredible, brutal way of being honest, and it teaches you a lot of things. And they don't beat around the bush; they just tell you what you're thinking. And I think that is so critical to business and to doing almost anything. I think that's a key thing that I look for. Is that direct feedback, and it may hurt, and maybe we got to sometimes use better words to describe it. But I think those are important things, because you just got to know, okay, are we doing the right thing or not?
Right. Yes.
Great answers. Yeah. The trusted circle, the importance of that. So let's talk about innovation. Each of you have, I'm sure the word comes up every once in a while, or something that's important to the organization, and what are the new things you're doing, even during this time period, perhaps. Lee, any perspective on what you're focusing on in the future, what innovation looks like in the future? What now that the news of today is perhaps in the past as of today, but also as a good perspective on what happened today for you. What are you focusing on in the future as far as innovation, new product development, new developments?
Yeah. I think about innovation in two different ways, because we're a very supply chain focused company. There's what we're doing on our value chain, and then there's what we're doing for the consumer. People are drinking coffee at home. That's what we're finding. And so we released a 20-ounce bag. In the past, we sold 12-ounce bags and 5-pound bags, and people who needed something in between. So we rolled out 20-ounce bags. That's our one aspect of our innovation. We also have seasonal blends that come through. And, you know, some people, like craft beer drinkers, are sort of coffee journeyers and they want to try different coffees all the time. So our snowshoe brew, which is our winter seasonal blend, will be coming out soon. And then in terms of value chain, we're just always looking for ways to continue, as Scott mentioned earlier, you know, stabilizing the quality of our coffee, helping farmers improve the quality of their coffee, so that we can continue to offer, you know, an excellent cup of coffee for coffee drinkers. So we're, you know, I could go on and on, but, you know, we're constantly working on projects on our supply chain to help with that.
That's wonderful. And Scott, come on, we got new products coming, right? New innovations, things.
Yes, I mean, that's what, you know, we think this is a white space, and we hear that a 90% chocolate, it tastes like a 70%. But how do you come up with that? I think it's, you have to challenge your biases, because we all have biases. All of us have a bias. And to me, like, I was deeply seated in the cocoa world, and so basically everyone around me has not been in the cocoa world. And I purposely did that because I know my biases would take me a certain path. And whenever I would talk to people who are doing something that I thought, well, I would have never done that. And I'm like, why? And I had to look, why would I have not done that? Oh, because I've had these experiences that would never let me think past X. And I'm like, okay, I cannot surround myself with people who have similar experiences. So to me, the innovation is like Capsule. You guys have never done anything in chocolate before. So to me, the innovation was get Capsule involved, because you don't have a bias about chocolate. So you have no idea other than what your personal bias is, your personal. I'm like, well, okay, here, to me, that's an innovation, is get people involved who've never really done this, because they'll start to, sure, we'll hit some things that everybody else has already done, but we'll actually go past things that people stopped at before. So to me, that's a big part of the innovation. And I think, and then the other thing, part of that is just keep trying to put yourself out of business. If you keep trying to put yourself out of business, or keep trying to fail, let's fail fast. You know, because then you just know quickly, no, that didn't work. So let's, you know, here's where we're trying to go. And I think that's part of that innovation. And I think the third thing, it's kind of funny because most of us have been working at home, and I get right now, I'm in an office space, but working at home, my kids, I have 5 children, and my kids see me on the phone all the time. They're like, Dad, why are you on the phone all the time? And I'm like, if I'm not on the phone, we're not creating value. If I'm not on the phone, you know, it's talking to people, it's challenging those things, it's learning from people. And I think that's an innovation, to just keep talking to people, keep finding out what is different. And that's part of finding out what's true, what's the fact, what is true, and keep narrowing in on what that is that where your vision is, where you're going.
I think it's really interesting that you bring up your coming from chocolate and moving to chocolate isn't necessary. You know, there's aspects of that are beneficial, and there's aspects of that are challenging. I think this about the coffee industry all the time, that the coffee industry spends so much time talking to each other, and they don't look at the consumer enough. And I guess I don't know why it never occurred to me that happens in other industries, but it probably does too. I've just spent so much time in coffee, but you know, it's over the past several years that I've really just been like, okay, that's like, there's industry conversation and then there's consumer conversation. I think too many companies just stay in the industry conversation, and it really limits their ability to grow.
Yeah, that's a good, good insight. Yeah, the fact that we kind of, as human beings, we manage out uncertainty, and that kind of shows up in an industry in the fact that you get to these patterns that exist in those industries. And then we've said this many times, in almost every industry, the only big innovations that happen come from outside that industry. So if you don't have people outside that industry in it, then you're not going to see those coming at all. Right. And then doesn't matter how smart. I mean, if you look at it historically, Google missed social. How does the what many see as one of the smartest companies, out there culturally. Maybe not. They miss social altogether, right? And there's all kinds of other examples of that if you just look around. It's important to have that outside perspective. It's hard to look at it, right? Because some of it's stuff you don't want to see, you don't want to know, you don't want to admit that that's a thing in certain industries. Those are great, insightful answers. Kelly, are you up for the next question? I believe.
Yes, I've got a meaty question that again is complex, but just first reaction. We've had a lot of conversations, certainly on the Capsule side, around digital transformation and the impacts this moving to digital, technology in supply chain like blockchain, and other ways of traceability. We talk about transparency in the supply chain. How are we measuring that, and giving the farmer and the consumer the data they need to make smart decisions? Would love to get both of your perspectives on seeing the shift to digitalization as a benefit. Is it a benefit to your respective industries and organizations? And are you embracing the use of these digital technologies and data collections in your own businesses? Again, a lot in there. Just first reaction. Wants to take it first? Lee?
So we, there's lots of blockchain projects going on. So many blockchain projects going on in coffee. Everyone's jumping on blockchain. We recently signed on to pilot a new platform that is going to allow coffee farmers to sell directly to coffee roasters. So it's an online marketplace. And there's lots of elements in there where there's lots of technologies being developed to help monitor the moisture of the coffee as it ships. I mean, it really goes deep into all kinds of different ways you can digitize the coffee value chain, and we see lots of different benefits to it. But the primary selling point of the platform is coffee farmers can go directly onto this platform and list a coffee and list a price, and they can begin to see what other coffees are selling for. There will obviously have to still be an importer involved, but it kind of cuts that importer, limits that importer's role, I should say. And so there'll be a small group of coffee roasters, some importers, and then some of our producer partners have agreed to go on as well. And again, having everybody see all of that information and the power of all of that information, it could very well be transformative. We'll definitely learn something from it. And that's the primary reason to start digging into things like this, is so we can continue to evolve our learning and figure out how to use all of this digital transformation that's at our fingertips to improve things both for roasters and for the coffee farmers.
Thanks, Lee. It's great. Scott?
Lee, what was the name of that site again? What's that at?
I don't know if it has not been revealed, but you and I can connect more offline about it.
Okay, that was interesting. I thought you said it. Okay, I was like, wow, that's quite good. I mean, yeah, there's other issues that happen when that happens, but yeah, that's quite good. Absolutely. Like I'm working with a group because in order to connect the farmer to the consumer and for the farmer to understand more, like the supply chain, and I'm sure it's the same way in coffee, but I mean, like the time the cocoa gets harvested, by the time it's fermented, by the time it gets to be processed into chocolate, it's months. And you're like, okay, how do you get that feedback back to that farmer to be able to understand? I mean, we have the same issue in the grain industry in the United States in a lot of ways, but that's a whole other topic. But how do you get that? How do you link that technology? How do you get to be able to get feedback quicker? Use the technology that's out there today. Use WhatsApp, or use video conferencing with all these things that are out there. And I think it's incredibly important. I foresee that that's going to become more important, not necessarily for the end consumer to understand. I mean, yeah, it may be interesting for some end consumers to know exactly where my cocoa came from, but actually in the business, there's efficiencies that we gain of understanding and being able to feed back to that farmer quicker, or to that co-op or to that region, understanding because of whether rain or the amount of sun that's happened in that area, or because of different weather patterns and or because, we can compare it to the years before. We know that, hey, this cocoa is going to taste like this, or we know that this is going to be a problem. You need to ferment it this way. And there's a lot of learning to do there. And but I see that, and I'm working with a group called Petrichor, and Petrichor is helping me to digitize all that whole supply chain so that we can have that at our fingertips and be able to run that, I don't know, almost regression analysis of what's been happening in the, on one side, what's going on with things they can't control, weather, politics, things like that, to what can they control, the fermentation, the harvesting, and what's the impact on that quality of that bean, and then what do we see and what do we taste. And that, it'll take time, but I absolutely see, I don't know, it's 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, there will be much more direct contact and to that farmer, to that farming community, to be able to get them to say, oh, when we make these changes, when these things are happening, this is influential, and this is influential to the final consumer. So I embrace that as that's a key thing to make that our supply chain more transparent, but also to help get a better quality product for us, which is also better for the farmer and you as a consumer.
Great. Yes. Thank you. Great responses.
Yeah. I mean, it's the fact that we can be on a Zoom and be with people globally in this environment, yet, our food is global. We should be able to connect more globally with where our food comes from. I have an entrepreneurial question that's come through in the chat from Joel, and I thank you for that question. Though I am always challenged by the words work-life balance as an entrepreneur. I don't understand the concept, but I think I need to ask it of the two of you. The role of being in charge of the change that you want to see in the world, and all that there is to change. How do you ever sleep? How do you balance life and work, or is it one and the same? Or what do you see as entrepreneurs? Do you want to start us off on that? Because you're probably, you've been in this entrepreneurial thing a little bit longer.
I think you can't think about it like balance. I don't think that works, because that implies that there's a steady state of perfection, right? When you're balancing something, it's like it's perfect. And I don't think about it that way. When I talk about Peace Coffee like almost like it's a piece of clothing for me, right? It's something that I know when it's out of balance, right? The same way I know when I'm out of balance. And so I'm constantly thinking about those two things. Now I have to stay in balance, right? Because I lead a team of almost 50 people, and how I'm doing matters to them, and how they're doing matters to me. But it's because Peace Coffee is so ingrained in me. I can think about Peace Coffee while I'm raking leaves. I can think about Peace Coffee while I'm, driving. I can think about Peace Coffee while I'm doing anything. So you have to just make sure that you're doing things that make you, that center you. But really, working for me could look like raking leaves and thinking about Peace Coffee. So, that, I guess that's the best answer I have. It's not really life altering or world changing. I apologize.
No, that's a great perspective.
Yeah, for sure.
Wonderful perspective. Yeah. I mean, it's when do you not think about it, right? That's the editing process you mentioned. That's interesting. So Scott, how long do you think about chocolate? How often do you think about chocolate?
Oh, you just constantly think about it. So, but there's times you don't. I'm a Chicago Bears fan, sorry, and sometimes I'll watch the Chicago Bears, so I can cry and think about other things. Interesting. So I had a 21-year career at ADM, and to me, I was always working. Grew up on a farm, and grew up when you're on a farm. There's no work-life balance. Life is work. And then I worked at ADM, and you start just working, and thinking, okay, I'm going to work hard so someday I can retire. But then there really is no work-life balance, because you're working for something that's really not yours. And once you break away from that and you realize, hey, I'm doing this really for someone else, or I'm doing this, I'm not really enjoying this as much as I'm. In one fact, when I lived in Europe, in the Netherlands, they said it was very generalization, but said you Americans, you have it wrong. You Americans, have it wrong. You Americans, you work to live, whereas us Dutch, we live to work. And I first was offended by that, and I thought, I think they're right. You know, they have 5 to 8 weeks of vacation a year, and I was like, oh yeah, you should enjoy life. But then as I came back to the United States and as I became an entrepreneur, I was like, no, actually, I mean, we do live to work because it's all integrated. And actually we're created to work. We're created to create. And I'm like, well, then it's got to be it's all interwoven to what we're doing. And so you got to find what you're good at, what you like to do, where the need is. And once you find that spot, which I think we have, or I have in Burst Chocolate, then it's like, it's not really work. It's just, it's not really work. You are constantly thinking about it, but it's just like, oh no, there's people who need this. There's people who want this. There's people who, like, you know, I think about all the people who feel guilty about eating chocolate because there's so much sugar in it, or they feel guilty. I'm like, you don't have to feel guilty at all about eating chocolate. Eat chocolate, it's good for you. And so I'm like, well, I just think there's a lot of work to be done, and I get excited about that. So to me, it's not, how do you deal with work-life balance? I don't know. Some of you know this, but we just launched here October 5th, and whenever, you know, as that was happening, our chocolate factory is up in Michigan, and I'm down in Springfield, Missouri, and it's about a 9 to 10 hour drive away. And I basically, we started, because of the pandemic, but we started homeschooling our kids when we lived in Europe. We just said we'd do it for 1 year, and we did it the second year, and the third year we kept doing it. Well, whenever we're launching, and we said, hey, I got to go up to Michigan for 2 weeks, maybe 3 weeks, and told my wife that. And about 3 hours later, she called me and she said, well, if you're going to go, why don't we just all go? And so work-life balance, we just took the whole family and all got involved. We were like, okay, you know, and just said, you know, it's part of it. It's part of what we do. So to me, it's just, I don't know the term work-life balance, actually. I think it's, I don't know. It's part of the interwoven parts of what we do.
Yeah.
And it's fun.
There you go. Gotta be fun. So in that same vein, and I guess I'll shift to pandemic and how we're operating, we're living, we're working, connecting, pandemic, but from a business decision, you know, when there's so much uncertainty, certainly political climate, et cetera. What priorities are you choosing to focus on? If you'd be willing to share a couple of the, you know, it's so much uncertainty, right? What are you choosing to apply as a focus for you, at least for the foreseeable future?
I mean, I think for me, that gets back to exiting the retail business, focusing on the wholesale business, which is the real core and much bigger of the businesses. You know, I think that decision probably may not have happened, or certainly would have taken much longer to happen. And I think there's a way in which the pandemic is requiring that people keep things simple. Mm-hmm. You know, you need to keep things as simple as possible. You know, you need to make sure people are getting clear messages, your employees are getting clear messages, that, you know, employees know where to focus even more so than in the past. And so, you know, we're focusing on our core, which is, you know, selling bags of coffee to grocery stores. That's really our core business. We're very fortunate that we didn't have a lot of food service accounts. So when the pandemic hit, you know, we're still growing quite a bit. And, you know, the other thing for us was we had already redesigned our website, implemented a better e-commerce platform. So very lucky that way too, in that, you know, people are just buying stuff online. So to the extent that you can focus on e-commerce or build a stronger e-commerce aspect into your business, now's the time you should be doing it.
Thanks, Lee. Yes, sounds great. Simplicity. Scott.
That's I think Lee, she just, you know, understanding your core, that's understanding your core, what you're good at. And I mean, when you first said it, like, what are you focused on? The first thing I think of was cash flow. I mean, you know, and you have to have cash. If you don't have cash, you can't operate. Cash is, you know, when you work at a big company, cash, you don't even think about cash. When you drop down into work at a pet food and cooking company and you're much smaller, all of a sudden cash becomes really important. When you become an entrepreneur, cash is paramount to what you're going to do. And so you need to understand what's core. You understand what's that focus. So you're constantly being scrappy, you're being focused on, are we making the right decision? People understand some of those key things. I mean, so like for us right now, most, you know, is how do we, in the most efficient way, do we get the most people to know about Verse chocolate and to want to try Verse chocolate? Now, you know, with that, we want to, you know, we want to give away a lot of samples. I'm happy to give away free samples right now of Verse chocolate just to get people to try it, because when those who love it, not everybody likes it. Some people hate it, and I get that because it's a certain taste, but those who love it, boom, they're coming back and buying it and buying it and buying it. And to me, it's about how do we get as many people right now, that's just how do we get as many people as possible to try Verse chocolate? And then that creates cash flow coming back. And that's the core of what we have to do.
Right.
Yeah, that's great. My next question is the question about the brands that you admire for what they're doing. Brands out in the world, perhaps people, but more, I think, interesting is the ones that inspire you and why in the broader community. Lee, do you have brands that inspire you?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people would say Patagonia, but that's, you know, getting your business to the size where you can just plant your stake in the ground and say, I mean, I think more brands need to do this, and Peace Coffee does this quite a bit, but they just have planted their flag in the ground and said, here's what we stand for. And they are shamelessly diverting resources to that. And I just, that's aspirational for me, because I'd love to get my business to the size where I can really put my money where my mouth is. And yeah, that would be my first answer. I think what Ben & Jerry's has done is pretty cool in terms of selling and becoming a publicly traded corporation, but keeping a mission lock with their board of directors. And I know people who work for them, and I also appreciate that they've really continued to scale and keep their brand true to what they, yeah, so true to the original intentions of the company.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we always love mentions of Patagonia.
Yeah,
of course. How about you, Scott?
Those are good. I guess I'm probably, I was going to keep it simple, and there's one that I just really, it's Pacha soap. And Pacha soap, P-A-C-H-A soap, I don't know if any of you know them, but they, their founder, I got to meet him a little over 3 years ago, and he always talks about product. You got to make a great product, and if you don't make a great product, nobody will buy it. And he has been focused on that. It's got to be a great product. It's got to be a great product. And you know, he was Whole Foods Innovator of the Year, I think, in 2017, and Supplier of the Year in 2018. And it's because he was just, you know, he made a great product, and then he got the word out, and he went out, and it was just, he believed in his product so much, and he came up with some innovations. He, you know, had nude bars of soap out there, and, you know, started doing that. But the smell, the smell of his product is so good that it just really, so I don't know, Pacha soap. That's my, make a great product, believe in it, and he absolutely does. Andrew Verbis is his name, and he just believes in that, and he knows when you make a great product. And the other thing is ingredients. His ingredients are absolutely key, and knowing my background of commodity, the ingredients are key. Now, commodity ingredients may not be as key as the specific ingredients that are going to differentiate yourself. And I think so. I'm just really respect Pacha soap for what they've done.
And the mission-driven aspect of what they do, which again is in line with what both of you have shared today in terms of transparency, ethical commerce, et cetera. So, yeah.
And we didn't tell them to plug 2 of our clients, just so we're clear here. We didn't do that.
It just happens.
Love Pacha. Kelly.
I know we only have a couple of minutes left here, and this is just a fun question we like to ask our speakers to share. And this, I'm putting you both on the spot. So again, react however you can and feel comfortable.
I thought these were all fun questions.
They are fun. They are fun. They're all softball. A
Okay.
favorite book or TV series, movie that you've watched or have read in the the recent past or currently that you'd share with the group today that has inspired you, has been informative?
Go ahead, Lee.
Okay. Well, I'm going to be transparent and say that my pandemic reading has definitely trended toward diversion, and I have been, and my TV and movie watching as well has also tended more toward diversion. I've been tending toward the later topics because there are lots of serious things that I get exposed to every day. So, and everybody else. So, I've been reading, William Kent Kruger wrote a series, mystery series that's based in northern Minnesota. I am blanking on the name of the first one. The second one is called Boundary Waters. Can't remember what the first one's called, but they're well written, interesting, talk about sort of the Scandinavian and interaction with the indigenous tribes up there. So I recommend them.
Great. Thank you, Lee. Love it. Okay, Scott, there's no right or wrong answer.
I just, that's a good one. I'm going to go something probably because of like a diversion. You asked about how do you think about things differently. And recently, and it's probably a combination of having family time together with my family. But recently, we started watching together, something kind of mindless, but we think it's fun, is like a real estate show called Love It or List It. Has anybody ever watched Love It or List It? And my youngest daughter found it, and we just laugh and love it. And I don't know, it's just been kind of this, it's kind of mindless, but we all trying to guess, are they going to sell the house, not sell the house? I don't know. So so I don't know. I guess it's kind of just takes your mind off of, serious things and allows you to decompress. So that's what I would probably say. Because when I read, I usually read stuff that's very deep and thoughtful about, what we're supposed to, I just believe we are supposed to create, and that we're supposed to take the gifts we have, and we're supposed to create for the people around us and to serve others. And so I just when I read, that's what I typically read about, is how do we serve others and how do we create so we can be creating for others. So.